The Detroit Lions are the team that you should bet on to win the NFC North. That is what a Pro Football Focus podcast said. And today we're going to be talking about it. Let's get it started. Welcome in everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. If you guys have not seen my deep ball haul video, you should definitely check it out. It's pretty cool. I plan to do those videos on a lot of players. We've always got a lot of time off. We got like basically a whole month. So I thought we'd go through a lot of our players, talk about it and what their potential could be for 2020. So if you guys want to see more of those, then, just let me know. I'll definitely bring those to you guys. Also, I am trying to get a lot of people on the show. I've reached out to a lot of people. We'll see who replies. I have a couple of people lined up that aren't players, but a couple of people that I think you guys may be interested to hear from. So I got a couple of people lined up right now, but I'm just trying to see on who I can get onto the show. So, I'm going out there. I'm going to ask. If they don't reply, hey, it's all right, man. It is what it is. We'll ask again some other time, We're trying. We're going to reach out to as many people as possible to make our percentages go up, I guess. But anyways, Pro Football Focus put out a forecast podcast. And in this episode, they talked about the NFC North and specifically about the Detroit Lions. And they said that the Lions are the team to bet on to win the NFC North. And one of their main points for that was because the Lions have less question marks than any other team in the NFC North.
I know that Matt Patricia's had has some warts, obviously, and has had a difficult time of it. But I look at this team, and I think there are less question marks about this team than there are of any team in the division.
Which is facts. I think that is facts. And I did a video a while ago about saying, hey, the NFC North is pretty much wide open. And if you look across team by team, it basically is. Like, let's look at the Packers, for example. The Packers, they drafted a quarterback in the first round. There's already a little bit of, there's a little bit of heat over there, I think. But then at the wide receiver position, they don't have great wide receivers. We know that. Yes, they were 13-3 last year. I'm being honest here. I'm not worried about the Packers whatsoever. Two of the teams that they did lose to are two teams that we beat last year. To me, the Green Bay Packers aren't that great. We know we definitely should have beat them the first time. And even the second time, we were with a third-string quarterback, and we had that game. We just blew it at the end. We can definitely beat the Green Bay Packers, and they don't concern me that much.
And they led Green Bay for every single minute last year. In both games. They lost both because of randomness and stuff. But
I think last year they could be one of the bottom teams in the NFC North. I'm not even kidding. I really do. And some people will look at that and be like, oh, you're crazy. Well, just, come back to me at the end of the year. If they're one of the best teams, I'll say it. I'm wrong. I've said it before. But I do believe that the Green Bay Packers will be one of the worst teams in the NFC North. I can see them finishing last. It would not shock me if they finished last with all the tension going on over there. But the real teams that have a lot of question marks are the Vikings and the Chicago Bears. The Vikings and Chicago Bears have some big question marks. Starting off with Chicago Bears, I think the glaring one in the room is the quarterback situation. They have two quarterbacks. We don't know which one is going to start. I don't think either of those quarterbacks are better than Stafford. Obviously, I don't think either of them are better than Stafford. They're not better than Stafford. Even Pro Football Focus said that it's funny, but Matthew Stafford's obviously better than both of those two quarterbacks in Chicago. No matter who comes out of the two, Matthew Stafford's better than both. So we have the better quarterback.
In comparing them player for player, I'm just like, I laugh at this. Matt Stafford is dramatically better as a quarterback than either of the two guys that Chicago trots out there. Kenny Golladay is awesome. Marvin Jones is really good. You have Danny Amendola in the slot. Their defense, I know they got rid of Darius Slay. They brought in Trufant. They draft Okudah. Julian Okwara is a guy that, I think will be a value there where they got him as a pass rusher.
They added Trey Flowers last year.
But they have that going on. They don't have a very good running game. If there's one team that we probably have a better running game than, it's the Chicago Bears. I think we actually had a better rushing attack in terms of yards than the Bears did last season. So I think, the Bears don't have a great rushing attack. They have some solid wide receivers. Their defense, they lost a couple of pieces. They did add two edge rushers. That's the only concerning thing for me is that defense because I know they're going to try to get to the quarterback. But there's definitely a lot of questions going on in Chicago. However, I think Chicago could be better than Green Bay. That's just my thoughts. And then when you look at a team like Minnesota. Minnesota, last year, were probably the most complete team in the NFC North. Maybe they were the most complete team in the North. I feel like they were. But this year, even up to the draft, right, they lost some secondary players. They brought in some new guys that are unproven. So, hey, you know what? I guess there's a couple of question marks there. They lost some defensive line guys like Everson Griffin. But I think the big question mark is now Dalvin Cook holding out. Losing your top running back. Sure, they have Alexander Mattison, but it's different from going to a backup to a starter running back and getting way more carries, over 100 more carries than you got before. The Vikings heavily rely on the rushing game. They're not a team that just throws the football all the time. They rely on the rushing game to set up the pass. Kirk Cousins barely threw for over 3,000 yards. Well, he threw for 3,600 last year, which isn't bad, but they are a run-first team that sets up all their passes basically on play action from the run game. So if the run game isn't great or it's not consistent, it can definitely hurt. And when you look at the Detroit Lions, we shouldn't have as many question marks as those teams. I mean, their one question mark they brought up is Matthew Stafford's injury history, but they said it was a kind of fluky injury. Hopefully it is, right? That is probably the one big question mark that we do have. But our offensive line, it was fine last year. Could have gotten even better this season. Our running back group hasn't been great, but, I mean, you would say that it has to have gotten better this offseason. At least it didn't get worse. If anything, it didn't get worse. We didn't lose any major pieces there. Wide receiver group, probably the best in the NFC North, hands down. Tight end group, one of the top in the North, but the tight end group for all North teams is kind of confusing at this point. And defensively, they talked about the Patriots that we added and how, Matt Patricia hasn't had the best start with Detroit, but they may turn that around. And I think he will. I think he needs players that want to buy into it. I mean, you can't have a team that doesn't buy into it or doesn't want to play for you or has problems with the coach. It won't be successful. I don't care who those players are. It just isn't going to be successful. It isn't going to last. And, then once we traded with Quandre Diggs, I feel like the whole locker room fell completely apart. And it kind of all went downhill from there because you trade away Quandre Diggs, Darius Slay gets mad. The line, it's like a division in the locker room, right? Players, coaches, some players are split, on which side to go to. And then all of a sudden, Matthew Stafford goes down in the second half, so you're missing Matthew Stafford, who is the leader of the team. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, literally, the dominoes just continue to fall last season, make it worse and worse, which, like I said before, could be a blessing in disguise. The Lions were able to pick up the third pick in the draft.
Collins, they get Desmond Trufant. They get Danny Shelton, Jaron Kearse, a former Viking, Reggie Ragland, a former Chief. I think that this team has a much better shot of competing for this division than anybody gives them credit for.
I mean, if you look at it on paper, I would say the Lions have the least amount of question marks. I think a lot of people believe the Lions roster is good. Even other NFC fans believe the Lions roster is good. I mean, if you talk to NFC North teams, most teams, I'm assuming they will because I'm going to talk to some guys in a little bit. I'm curious to see what they have to say, but from what I've heard, most NFC North team fans that are not Detroit Lions fans think the Lions have a good roster. They think is what's holding them back is Matt Patricia, and that's why they won't be successful. Obviously, we have to see it from Matt Patricia, but there's reason to believe in Matt Patricia, right? He's shown us some good things. The offense got a lot better last year. Defense was good in 2018. We just need to put them together. And like I said last year, I think everything just kind of fell apart. And we weren't that bad early in the season. We weren't. I mean, we have one of the top secondaries in the league, and now Matt Patricia has guys, so it's got to work out. You just kind of have to believe that it will work out for Matt Patricia. I believe it. I mean, there's not a lot I can say. There's a couple things. I showed you videos on why I believe in Matt Patricia.
Back from injury, which, you might know something about this in San Francisco.
I do. Thank you.
Jimmy Garoppolo coming back, a high draft pick that could make an impact right away in Jeff Okudah, and they spent in free agency to really fill out that roster. I mean, normally, adding a nose tackle is not that exciting, but the version of Snacks Harrison that we saw last year was an injured and maybe unmotivated because he didn't like his coach type of version. Mm-hmm. And so they bring in Danny Shelton, who's pretty good there.
Thank you. To whoever this guy is, thank you. That sounds pretty familiar. I think I said something like that before. Let's keep it going.
Jamie Collins is a guy who would understand maybe Matt Patricia's style of coaching, but that's still going to be the biggest question for me because everything checks every box for Detroit for being that team that, I mean, you would bet 100% of the time over everybody else for them to go over 6.5 versus the Vikings 9 or the Packers 9. Except for the coaching. I mean, when every player who leaves says the head coach is a major problem and we couldn't get along with him and his defensive scheme was awful and didn't fit us at all. And last year, their defense is brutal. Their defense is brutal 2 years ago when he was brought in to replace Jim Caldwell.
I gotta hop in right here. So this dude's preaching. He's saying good stuff. And it kind of backs up my point how I said, most people believe the coaching is a problem. But I do have to say a couple of things. First off, not every player says the scheme's bad. Well, actually, there's a few players out there, I would say not half, but, nearly half the players out there have said that they love it there. Mike Daniels is one of those guys that say they love it. They buy into it. A lot of guys are former Patriots like Trey Flowers, Danny Amendola. Those guys have loved it. And plus, in 2018, the 2018 defense was not horrendous. It was not terrible. It was actually pretty darn good. So I want to point those two things out. But hey, man, this speaks right to my point. So we'll see what he can do. I believe in him. Let's keep it rolling. But I can't go much further than that until he really proves it to us. But, I mean, most people believe we have a good roster. So the roster's there. Obviously, we have a good kicker, right? We have a reliable kicker. I mean, that's hurt us before. We've been hurt and burnt before because we didn't have a reliable kicker that could win a game, that could make 3 points. I mean, you got to be able to get 3 points that are there. I mean, if it's 50-plus yards, I get it. If it's 30 yards and you're missing those, that's a problem. And we had a year where he had multiple kickers during the year until we found Matt Prater, and we finally found our answer. And ever since then, he has been the answer for the Detroit Lions. He's been absolutely insanely clutch. I think the Lions roster roster is maybe the best in the NFC North. We just need to see them pull it all together in the short offseason, and that's where, the former Patriots, the guys familiar with all these coaches, the Tony McRae familiar with Brandon Coombs, all the Patriots familiar with Matt Patricia. And then the offense obviously was really good last season. If you get a healthy Matthew Stafford, it should be even better. They want to run the football. They tried to improve that with rushing offensive linemen, the big, mean offensive linemen. And then in the passing game, you still have one of the top passing games in the league. So, according to Pro Football Focus, this is a team. Do we love Pro Football Focus or what? I love PFF. And this is just another reason to love them.
Kansas City, I've talked about this game a ton. They had Kansas City on the ropes. Obviously, this is the eventual Super Bowl champion. And to me, that says a lot about a team. People have forgotten that. People generally view the Lions as this downtrodden organization. And you've got organizations with a bunch of big names in the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears. I just feel like people are sleeping on the Lions.
Okay, they said, I think that this team has a much better shot of competing for this division than anyone is giving them credit for. Hey, I'm giving them credit, PFF. I'm telling you right now. We've got to get someone from PFF on our show because that would be awesome. That's someone I need to reach out to. But, man, I do think the Detroit Lions can definitely win the NFC North in 2020. But I just love this, man. When you see this, and I feel like actually more things have been coming out about, hey, the Lions could be the sleeper team this year. Lions could be the sleeper team this year. And I think maybe some people are like kind of hesitant to say that it could be good because they just don't know, right? They don't know if the Lions are going to go good and stuff. Like right here, there's a fan that reacted to this article and said this. I agree somewhat, but I was expecting big things out of Lions during the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and somehow the Lions found a way to underachieve. So, boom, there you go. And that's the reason. That is the reason that some people are still scared to say the Lions can be great. But if we threw all those years away, all of a sudden you'd probably be looking at this in a different light, but you can't do that, unfortunately. So the Lions need to go out there and do it. They need to go out there and prove it. I don't want to just make the same videos, but when I see this stuff, man, hey, I get excited because I do believe the Detroit Lions are that team in the NFC North. And I think there's a lot of problems around the rest of the NFC North. And, someone asked me a question in my live chat yesterday. Hey, where's the Lions roster in the NFC North? Like, where would you rank the Lions roster in the NFC? He said, behind, the 49ers and Seahawks and stuff like that. There's not a lot of teams that I would say the Lions have a worse roster than. Across the board, they have a good roster. I love their team on paper. It's, again, like a lot of other team fans say, it's about the coaching, and we need the coaching to come together. I do believe with players that are going up for him, he'll be good because we have seen it. It's not like we've never seen Matt Patricia be successful. Even in 2018, his first year, when some players said there were some problems, they were still successful, right? Defensively, they weren't great. They were good, though. They were good in 2018. So we've seen it work. Now bringing guys that want to play for him, Duron Harmon that wanted to be traded Matt Patricia, you bring in all these Patriots that are familiar with the scheme day one, where it won't take long, and then you have all these other young guys either playing for a spot or that still are buying into what Matt Patricia is teaching them. And the offense, you really don't have to worry about too much. You finally got a great offense coordinator, and you have Matthew Stafford. So I think, if you're looking at the Lions, they definitely can be a team that wins the NFC North 2020. I just want to share this article with you guys. If you guys want to check it out, you definitely can. You can probably check out their podcast as well. But the Lions are who you should bet on to win the NFC North. And I'm not telling y'all to bet, but I would agree with that. Let me hear your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.